One fact of life is it will be tough. You're going to face trials, hard times, and if you haven't yet, it's only a matter of time. The world's a broken place, and because of that, there's hardships. And we were designed to live in unity with God, our Creator, but we use our free will to choose our own path, and this led to these hardships, and sometimes hardships for others. And a question I'm often asked is this: if God is so good, and if He loves us, why does He allow bad things to happen? And this is a fair question. It's relatively simple in the fact that God loves us so much that He gave us free will. We're not robots forced to love Him, but instead we choose to love Him. But with that free will, we also choose ourselves a lot of times, and that causes the issues and troubles in our lives and in the world. But this thing about our trials, our storms in life, our troubles, is that they're not always a bad thing. Actually, they're the opposite. They are used for good. In any trial you face, you do have two options. You can become bitter or become better. God's going to use the trials of life to refine you, to grow you into the person that He has created you to be. Not only just for you, but so that your trial will be a testimony that someone else needs to hear to make it through their own storm in life. And if you read through the Bible, it's not going to take you long to find a character that is going through a trial of some sort. Many people going through real problems, these real people, and many of which you might be able to identify with, but also a lot of them, we couldn't even fathom them happening to us. You have so many to choose from: Abraham, Joseph, Moses, Esther, Nehemiah, Ezra, Peter, Paul, Jesus Himself. Incredible stories, and the things that they went up against would terrify most of us. But I'm going to talk today about my guy David, the little shepherd boy who killed a giant. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that if you were to go to battle with a sword, shield, and go up against someone who's a 9.75 foot tall, massively built dude, his armor and weapons making your sword look like a toothpick, I believe I would be scared, and I believe you would too. And this is how we do find God's people as they face the Philistine champion Goliath. They're afraid, and they go day after day cowering in fear as this giant taunts them, and he belittles God and His people. We see in 1 Samuel chapter 17, 8 through 11, it says this, that Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming out to fight?" he called. "I am the Philistine champion, but you are only servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me." When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. See, Goliath isn't afraid of this army. He sees a people whose faith is weak, and in the face of that, he taunts them. And not as servants of God, but as servants of Saul, their coward king. And this is important to remember when David steps into the picture. But this taunting and fear, it goes for 40 days. But then David gets sent from the sheep fields to the battlefield to deliver bread and cheese. And when Goliath steps out to challenge and taunt the Israelite army, David witnesses the fear of the soldiers, and he asks them in 1 Samuel 17:26, "What will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel?" Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? I love this question. And I love how David, upon hearing and seeing Goliath, doesn't respond with fear, but instead of a righteous anger. He's not angry because he felt personally attacked or taunted, but he wasn't going to let anyone talk bad about his God and God's people. And we need to be ready to defend our brothers and sisters when their giants come against them. We need to have their backs and fight for them. Not just go with the flow or maybe even taking part in bringing them down. And then David's boldness is reported to King Saul. He calls for David, and David tells the king this in verses 32 through 37. It says, "Don't worry about this Philistine," he told Saul. "I'll go fight him." "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There's no way that you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth." But David persisted. "I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats," he said. "When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and I rescue the lamb. I rescue it from the mouth. And if the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and I club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine." Saul allows David to go fight Goliath. He gives him his armor and his weapon, and David takes a couple steps in Saul's armor, and then he realized he can't fight in this. He wasn't called to fight as Saul would. He was set apart to fight as David. How often do we try to do something as someone else did it, or maybe in their own likeness? And God has called you specifically to fight your battle. And David gets his sling, his staff, and 5 smooth stones, and he heads into battle. Take a moment and just look at this. Did David wake up that morning expecting to fight a giant? A giant that has terrified the entire Israelite army? No, the giants in our lives, sometimes they just show up without warning. But David had been through some stuff in his life, and his time in the fields and watching the sheep. God used those trials to prepare him for this exact moment. And when you face a trial or a giant, what are the things that you've gone through in the past that God has used to prepare you for that moment? There comes a moment when your giants will call you out. Are you going to step up, or are you going to cower in fear? David's battle, it began long before he stepped foot on the battlefield that day. It was in the field, facing down the lions and the bears with just a club. Facing a giant warrior man might seem terrifying, but when you have faced down lions and bears with nothing more than a club, it makes that fight seem a lot more doable. And we don't know if any of David's sheep were ever killed by any other animal. It might be assumed. At the very least, we can assume David had to practice slinging the rocks, and he probably missed a lot of his shots. Probably was not very good at first, but despite the failings, he never gave up. He kept going, kept getting better, and when he was ready, he faced Goliath. Even as a young boy, he stepped boldly onto the field of battle because no one ever wins by giving up. Goliath is taken aback when David steps out to fight him. It takes it almost as an insult. He begins to jeer and taunt all the more. And David responds with this. It says in 1 Samuel 17, 45 through 51, "You come to me with sword, spear, javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you've defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. Everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us." As Goliath moved closer to attack, see this, David quickly ran out to meet this giant. And he reached into a shepherd bag, took out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, Goliath stumbled, and he fell face down on the ground. David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone. He had no sword. David ran over, pulled Goliath's sword from its sheath, and he used it to kill him and cut off his head. David wasn't going to let Goliath triumph and take God's people, the land that God had given them. He stood up and he fought. He saw this opposition as an opportunity. And are you going to let the enemy take what's precious to you? Your friends, your family, your school, your community, your future? No, you stand and you fight. You see, David had no business being in the ring with Goliath, but he wouldn't let the lies of the enemy take his family, his country captive. Are you willing to do the same? You see, it's very hard to fight with your butt. But I'm too small. But I'm not good enough. But it's too hard. But they'll make fun of me or they'll hate me. But I've already failed before. See, when Goliath was dead, the men of Israel and Judah finally had their courage back, and they rushed after the Philistines. They chased the army, pursuing and killing them. You know, someone else living in fear needs to see that their giant can be defeated. Their depression, their anxiety, their fear, hopelessness, self-doubt, self-hate, shame, negativity, anger, distraction, that their addiction can be defeated. We aren't underdogs. As much as you might feel like it, we are more than conquerors. We are built to fight the fights ahead. But how are you training for it? Are you training for it? Nobody goes to war having only played Call of Duty or Fortnite. No matter how good you are at it, you need to be ready day in and out. ready for battle, overflowing with the power of God in your life. So when you face whatever you face it with God. And whatever it might be, it might seem over your head, but remember, it is under God's feet. In the book of Matthew, there's two stories of the disciples in storms. We see the first one, Jesus is asleep in the boat, and they wake him up panicking, and he tells the storm to stop, and it does. They're amazed, and they respond with this question: what kind of man is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him? And then there's a second time they're in a storm, and Jesus comes to them walking on water. He gets to the boat, the storm stops the moment he steps in, and the disciples' response, truly, this is the Son of God. Through their experience, they learn who Jesus is, and they welcome him into their storm. The storm was out of their control, and sometimes things out of our control, those are the things that control us. But we need to learn to control what we can, and that's our response. We respond by looking to Jesus, inviting him into our storm. And will our storm stop in the moment we invite him into it? No, probably not. But I tell you, that is the moment things begin to get better. David faced Goliath with the confidence that God was with him. And the disciples faced the storm looking to Jesus. And if he did it for them, guess what? He will do it for you. So what are you facing? It doesn't matter how impossible it may seem. My God is the God who held the sun in the sky so that his people could have victory. My God is the one who raised himself from the dead. My God is the one who walks in victory. And because of that, we walk in victory. Nothing is impossible for them and for those who walk with and trust in him. Just like fire refines the impurities out of precious metals, your trials refine you. And someone someday needs who you are being refined into. Your friends, family, your future self, your future family. So don't stop, don't quit, keep fighting, keep pushing through the storm, and make sure you keep your eyes on the one who controls it all, because he's got it. And he's with you. And when you trust in him, he will lead you through it. And not only that, he will grow you through it. So remember, when you face giants, when you face trials, look to Jesus. Look to God. He is with you, and how is he going to work through this in your life?